Okay, let's look at a couple of ideas that will come up repeatedly in Scratch and some basic techniques that you might find useful. Suppose we want Scratch now to draw a series of squares across the stage here. So first of all, let's change our sprite. So I'm going to delete this sprite and I'm going to create a new sprite from the library. The sprite I'm going to choose is a thing. So I click on things and I scroll down and I find the pencil. Okay, so I want my new sprite to be a pencil. This pencil looks too big. So I'm going to make sure this sprite is active, which it is because you can tell by the blue square around it. I'm going to click on one of these two icons up here. This is for growing, this is for shrinking. So I click on that and then I go to the sprite, I click on it and it will shrink until it's the size that I want. So that looks good to me. Okay, so now what I want this to do, the other thing is that I want to make sure that the sprite is drawing right from the pencil tip. And this, when you use the pen down, pen up, the pen always is placed at the center of the sprite. So I'm going to click on costumes here, which will bring me to this paint type screen. And when I click on this plus symbol here, I can see that the center of the sprite is actually somewhere in the middle of the pencil. So I'm going to move this so that the center of the sprite is right at the tip of the pencil. So now when the pencil draws, it'll draw right from the tip. Okay, so let's think about what I want this to do. First of all, I want it to draw a single square. So I know I'm going to want it to do something 4 times because we're drawing a square. So I'm going to use the repeat 4, and the motion that I want is I want it to move, let's say we want our square to be 50 steps, then I want it to turn, since it's a square, I'm going to have it turn 90 degrees. But in order to draw, I have to have it have pen down before it starts moving, but then I want to pull the pen up in case I wanted to move the square. I want to move over without it drawing. Well, I also want to make sure that before it draws the square, it clears away everything. And I want the action to be initiated when I click this green flag, so I'm going to go to Control, or rather Events, and I'm going to pull out this when clicked, attach it to the top. So now when I click, it draws a square. Draws a square. If I were to move the pencil up here, it would draw it up here. And again, you can see that before it drew this square, it cleared everything out. Otherwise, we would have all the old squares still there. Okay, so now what I want it to do is I want it to draw a square, move to the right, draw another square. So I need another control loop. So I'm going to have another repeat here, and I want to put this right here. I want to make sure the clear does not get in between these two because I don't want it to clear every time it moves over. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable by clicking on Data, make a variable. This variable is going to be the one that determines how many squares are drawn. So we'll call this num squares. And now, as you can see, it creates these additional blocks here. So I'm going to set num squares to, let's say, 5. So it's going to draw 5 squares. And that means that I wanted to repeat this outer loop not 10 times. I wanted to repeat it 5 times. But I wanted actually to repeat whatever the value of this variable is, num square. And so you can see that we have this block right here, which we can drag and replace the 10 with num square. And so now it's going to repeat, it's going to draw the square, but it's going to repeat that num square times, which in this case means it's going to repeat it 5 times. But what I wanted to do in between drawing squares is I wanted to move to the right. So I wanted to make sure that it moves far enough to, it's going to draw the square and it's going to go down to the right, up and back again. So I have to make sure it moves more than 50 steps to the right, so it'll leave a little space to get to a start of a new square. So we'll say 70. So we'll type in 70, and let's see what happens now when we click. Okay, it drew 5 squares. And so we have a loop embedded inside another loop, and that's a common thing that you want to be able to do in Scratch. We've also incorporated the use of a variable, which we can then use wherever, instead of a number throughout, we can use this variable.